What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Commentating Christian YouTube channel, where today I'm going to recap match week 21 in the Premier League. So after a weekend of exciting matches, we move on to the midweek, where we see match week 21. No upcoming Premier League games this weekend, as they will be the Carabao Cup instead. But nevertheless, guys, you guys know the drill by now. I separate the Premier League recap into 3 different categories. We start with the mid-card, and then we move on to other smaller results, and that's obviously right before we talk about the main event match of the week. So let's kick it off in the mid-card as Chelsea suffer a loss against a red-hot Fulham side. Raul Jimenez did open up the scoring in the 55th minute of this game with his 5th Premier League goal of the campaign. That's now 4 goals and assists in his last 5 games for the Mexican. It's got to be said that Jimenez has been absolutely brilliant for Fulham and has been a crucial part of their great run of form lately. Liam Delap would equalize for Chelsea in the 81st minute. This is Delap's first goal since joining the club this previous summer, and it came as a breath of relief for interim manager Callum McFarlane. But then, speaking of players who are on fire for Fulham, Harry Wilson would get the game-winning goal that would send Craven Cottage into absolute madness. That's now 7 goals to go along with his 4 assists so far this season. He also has 9 goal contributions in his previous 9 Premier League games. So with this result, Chelsea do drop to 8th place and Fulham are right behind them in 9th, level on points. Moving on, as Spurs lost to a struggling Bournemouth side. Now this was surely Antoine Semenyo's last game for Bournemouth, as it was confirmed this morning that he has been signed by Manchester City, but he definitely did help his team get 3 points right before he left. It was a promising start for Spurs as Matheus Tel scored in the 5th minute of this game. Evan Nielsen would then quickly equalize for Bournemouth as he got his 4th Premier League goal, and then that was quickly followed up by Krupi's 7th goal of the season. So now Bournemouth are up 2-1. But then in the second half, Paulinho would draw level for Spurs off an absolutely brilliant bicycle kick. Now, I don't know what it is, but whenever Spurs put on that yellow shirt, one player tends to pull off this spectacular move. Last time it was Christian Romero, this time it was Paulinho. So Spurs drew level 2-2, but then what followed was truly a fairy tale ending. Bournemouth's best player for 2 seasons now, Antoine Semenyo, would get the game-winning goal deep into stoppage time to give Bournemouth all 3 points and quite the sending away present. Now this goal was an absolute screamer from just outside the 18-yard box. So in his last game at the Vitality Stadium, Semenyo gave a true heartwarming gift to all the supporters of the Red Cherries. 31 goals and just 110 appearances for the club, 10 goals and 3 assists as well so far this season. I think it's safe to say Bournemouth are definitely going to miss Semenyo. So with this game, Bournemouth do snap that streak of going 11 games without a win, but despite this, they are still 15th, just 12 points above the drop zone. Meanwhile, Spurs, ironically, are only 1 point ahead of them and 1 place ahead of them in 14th. Moving on, as Manchester City drew against a very in-form Brighton squad. Now, City did go into this game with only 2 first-team choice center backs, as John Stones, Gavardio, and Ruben Dias all find themselves injured, so Kusanov and Ake had to start in the back for City. Erling Haaland now has 20 Premier League goals this season as he converted from the spot. However, it's got to be said that this is only his 2nd goal of the campaign coming from the penalty spot. 18 have come from open play. For comparison, next best scorer in the Premier League, Igor Thiago, does have 5 penalty goals to his name. Matoma would then equalize for Brighton in the 60th minute, and this goal proved to be enough to secure 1 point for the Seagulls. Now, it's got to be said early on, Manchester City did seem to be all over the place defensively. There seemed to be no organization in the back, and they actually found themselves lucky not to concede 2 goals late on in the second half against Brighton. Brighton did have 2 big chances, but it's got to be said after those chances, Man City had their own. Erling Haaland in particular had a header cleared off the line and had a shot from almost point-blank range go right to the hands of the Brighton goalkeeper. Nevertheless, City still remain in 2nd, 6 points behind league leaders Arsenal. Meanwhile, Brighton are still in 11th. Moving on, as the bad times keep on rolling for Manchester United as they drew once again, and this time against another newly promoted Premier League side, Burnley, 2-2. The bad luck started for United in the 13th minute as center back Aiden Heaven would put the ball in the back of his own net following a bizarre own goal. Now this was Bruno Fernandes' first game back for Manchester United since December 22nd, and he did get the assist for Benjamin Šeško's equalizer in the 51st minute. Benjamin Šeško then doubled his goal tally as he scored again in the 60th minute. That's now 4 Premier League goals so far this season. So United were ahead and looked like they were going to cruise to the victory, but Burnley had other plans as Jadon Anthony scored just 6 minutes after Šeško's go-ahead goal to equalize for Burnley. So Man United have fallen to 7th following this result, and Burnley are still obviously in the drop zone in 19th. So moving on to the final match in the mid-card before we move on to other smaller results. and it's got to be said, on paper this should have been the main event, but what a stinker Arsenal and Liverpool did produce as they drew 0-0. Arsenal had the chance to go 8 points clear of second and third place with a win, but with this result absolutely nothing changes as every team in the top 4 drew this past match week and no one seemed to gain any ground on anyone. So Arsenal remained first and Liverpool also remained 4th place. Now talking about this game, Arsenal did have 9 shots, 4 of which were on target, but it seemed like they left their finishing boots in the locker room. The most entertaining part of this game was probably the fight that broke out between the two teams late on in the second half, and this game was the last played of this match week on Thursday evening. And again, all the top 4 drew, all the top 4 stayed the same. If anything, the biggest winners to come out of this are Newcastle and Brentford, as with their wins, they go above Manchester United and Chelsea and are now only 2 and 3 points off of 4th place Liverpool, respectively. We'll get to those teams' results in just a second, but first let's move on to other smaller results, and let's kick it off with a relegation 6-point scrabble. As West Ham continue to struggle, this time they lost versus Nottingham Forest. So a battle between 18th and 17th in the Premier League, where Forest put some much needed distance between themselves and the drop zone. Meanwhile, I can confidently say now that West Ham, along with Burnley and Wolverhampton Wanderers, are now firmly in the drop zone and all but relegated at this point. Now Forest did win 2-1 and they scored all 3 goals in the process. Murillo actually scored an own goal for West Ham as he put the ball in the back of his own net off a corner kick. Nicolas Dominguez then scored in the 55th minute of this game to equalize, and then Morgan Gibbs-White converted a penalty in the 89th minute to give Forest all 3 points. So with this win, there is now a 7-point difference between Forest in 17th and the rest of the teams in the drop zone. West Ham remain 18th. And meanwhile, Nottingham Forest can finally breathe a sigh of relief. Moving on to another 0-0 draw, this time between Crystal Palace and Aston Villa. Now Villa do continue the roller coaster-like form as they seem to be up one week and then down the other. Meanwhile, Crystal Palace are yet to see a victory now in their previous 8 Premier League games. Following this result, Villa are still in 3rd, tied on points with Man City, still 6 points behind Arsenal. Meanwhile, Crystal Palace have fallen to 13th. Moving on, as Brentford beat Sunderland 3-0 after scoring a hat-trick last week, Igor Thiago bagged a brace this week to bring his Premier League goal tally to 16, only 4 behind the league leader, Erling Haaland, on 20. As I mentioned earlier, with this win, Brentford do climb to 5th in the Premier League, only 2 points behind 4th place Liverpool. Meanwhile, Sunderland, who were 5th not too long ago, have now fallen to 10th. Alright, last result in other smaller results before we move on to the main event, as this week sees yet another match day where Wolves picked up points. Wolverhampton Wanderers did draw 1-1 with Everton. Michael Keane opened the scoring for Everton in the 17th minute, but then in the second half, Matheus Mane would equalize for Wolves in the 69th. A couple of red cards would then follow in the 80th minute for Everton's Michael Keane and Jack Grealish, but Wolves were unable to capitalize on these red cards and the game was finished 1-1. So 2 weeks ago, Wolves did draw with Manchester United. Last weekend, Wolves actually beat West Ham, and then this week, they draw once again with Everton. The Wolves did pick up 5 points out of a possible 9 within the span of just 3 matches. It is a very impressive run of form they are on, especially compared to the first part of the season, but they still find themselves in the relegation in 20th. Meanwhile, Everton still remains in 12th. So moving on to the main event for the week, and like I said earlier, on paper it would have been that Arsenal and Liverpool game had it been not such a snooze fest. So let's talk about that 7-goal thriller between Newcastle United and Leeds United. 4-3 was the result in the end in favor of Newcastle. However, Leeds did kick off the scoring in the 32nd minute thanks to Brendan Aronson. Harvey Barnes would then equalize for Newcastle only 3 minutes later, and then right before the end of the first half, Dominic Calvert-Lewin would score his 9th goal of the season from the penalty spot to give Leeds the lead. Remember, not too long ago, Dominic Calvert-Lewin did have a run of 6 games where he was scoring consecutively. He then failed to score in his last 2 games versus Liverpool and Manchester United, but DCL now finds himself back on the score sheet. In the second half, Joe Linton would equalize for Newcastle in the 54th minute, but then after that, Brendan Aronson scored yet again to put Leeds back ahead. That's now 4 goals and 3 assists for the American in the Premier League. He also has 4 goal contributions in his last 4 games for Leeds. What a season Aronson is having, and it's got to be said, if you're Mauricio Pochettino, you would have to seriously start considering how you fit Brendan Aronson in the starting 11 for the United States ahead of the 2026 World Cup. But the drama did not stop there in this game, as then there was a penalty given in favor of Newcastle. So after trailing on 3 different occasions in this game, Bruno Guimaraes converted the penalty to draw level once again for the Magpies. So it looked like the game would end 3-3, but then deep deep into stoppage time in the 102nd minute actually of this game. Barnes scored yet again. That's now 5 goals for Barnes in the season. It's got to be said that these were also his first goals since November 25th. Now with this win, Newcastle, who honestly have been struggling for most of the Premier League season so far, having to juggle league play with the Champions League, are now in 6th place. Meanwhile, Leeds United are still in 16th. So that's going to do it for the Premier League recap for match week 21. As always, guys, thank you so much for coming back to my channel and checking out the Premier League recap. Once again, no matches this upcoming weekend as the Carabao Cup will take place instead of the Premier League, but I'll see you next weekend to recap match week 22. Hope you guys are having a good New Year so far, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Take care, and God bless.